You thought her forgiveness was love. It wasn't. It was strategy. Because when a woman forgives you, she isn't healing. She's rearranging the battlefield. She doesn't raise her voice. She lowers yours. She doesn't punish you with anger. She rewards you with calm. And that, brother, is the deadliest form of domination. You see, forgiveness feels pure only to the one who's desperate for it. To her, it's leverage emotional currency she can spend for years. The moment she says, "It's okay, I forgive you," something ancient awakens inside her, the instinct to secure control after chaos. She senses your relief, the drop in your tone, the collapse in your posture, the dopamine flooding your brain, and she knows you'll do anything not to lose that peace again. That's when she stops being the wounded woman and becomes the quiet architect of your behavior. Forgiveness is not reconciliation, it's reprogramming. She isn't rebuilding love, she's installing control software inside your mind. From that day on, your choices stop being about what you want and start being about what keeps her calm. You walk softer, you explain more, you filter every sentence through her comfort. You don't even notice the cage forming because it's lined with kindness. I once knew a man who told me, "She forgave me, man. She's an angel." 3 months later, he was asking for permission to hang out with his own friends. That's how forgiveness works. It doesn't chain you overnight. It dissolves your will molecule by molecule. And the more grateful you feel, the deeper you sink. Because the truth is, she doesn't need to yell to control you. She just needs to let you believe you're lucky she stayed. You think forgiveness is morality, but to her it's biology, an ancient code buried deep inside the female nervous system, older than language itself. Long before civilization, long before relationships, women survived not by punishing men, but by taming them. Evolution wrote one command into her DNA: control the protector, or perish. Every time she forgives, her body releases oxytocin, the binding chemical, while her mind reasserts dominance. That's why she can forgive betrayal but never weakness. Strength excites her nervous system. Submission repels it. In prehistoric tribes, a woman couldn't afford to exile a strong hunter. Just because he strayed, she needed his resources, his defense, his genes. Forgiveness became a survival mechanism, a way to keep power nearby while pretending to surrender. What looks like compassion is really calibration, a precise recalculation of hierarchy. When she says, "I forgive you," her limbic system isn't thinking about morality, it's measuring risk versus reward. Her calmness isn't peace, it's control returning to her hands. She forgives you not to heal, but to secure position. And here's the part no one says out loud. The more emotional you become during that forgiveness, the faster your masculine polarity dies. Because to her biology, tears signal failure, apologies trigger maternal instincts, and once she feels like your mother, attraction collapses. She can love you, even care for you, but she will never desire you again. That's the evolutionary trade. Her forgiveness keeps the tribe alive, but it kills the man's authority. It's nature's silent contract. She maintains safety. You lose sovereignty, so when she forgives, don't mistake it for grace. It's a transaction, written in hormones and fear, signed in the bloodstream of every woman who ever had to survive through charm, compliance, or quiet control. Forgiveness isn't a gift, it's a biological negotiation where she always walks away holding the power. She forgives to survive, and every time she does, another piece of you forgets how to lead. You think you're rebuilding trust, but what's really happening is neurological conditioning, a rewiring of your reward system until her forgiveness becomes the only drug your brain wants. When you mess up, your dopamine drops, your body enters withdrawal. She pulls away, and cortisol floods your veins. You panic, beg, explain. Then she forgives, and your brain rewards you with the biggest dopamine spike you've felt since falling in love. That's not romance. That's biochemical dependence. I once worked with a man who said her silence hurt worse than violence. He didn't realize his body had learned to crave her approval more than oxygen. She becomes the dealer, you become the addict, and every "it's okay" hits harder than any narcotic. You'll start chasing that calmness, doing anything to keep her from going cold again. That's how forgiveness becomes behavioral control. She doesn't need to yell, she just needs to withhold. One silence from her can erase your confidence faster than 1,000 insults. Your nervous system learns to associate peace with obedience. You stop leading, You start performing. You call it love, but it's submission disguised as devotion. I've seen men who couldn't sleep without texting a final apology, terrified of waking up to her indifference. They thought they were fixing things, but their brains were just begging for another dopamine hit. That's the real high, the chemical illusion of safety. And she knows, consciously or not, that as long as she controls your guilt, she controls your pleasure. Because in the circuitry of forgiveness, there's no balance, only dominance. She forgives to remind you who decides when your world feels right again. You think you've earned her peace, but you've only paid for it with pieces of your freedom. By the time you notice it, you're already inside it, the invisible cage built not from anger, but from grace. She no longer needs to raise her voice or make demands. Her calmness is enough. You start explaining your whereabouts before she even asks, deleting messages not because they're wrong, but because they might look wrong. You stop making choices that could disturb her peace. That's the first red flag when your instincts are no longer your own. The second is silence, her favorite instrument. She forgives you, then grows quiet, and your entire body tightens, waiting for the verdict hidden in that stillness. You read her expressions like scripture, searching for signs of disapproval. You call it communication, but it's surveillance. She's not checking up on you, she's training you to check yourself. Then there's the third sign, selective affection. She hugs you more when you obey, pulls away when you challenge. Her touch becomes a behavioral feedback system. Affection as reward, distance as punishment, and the most dangerous, the spiritual tone. She speaks like a healer now, the one who endured and rose above, and you're the work in progress she's refining. You don't realize that her forgiveness is now the foundation of her superiority. She's the saint, you're the sinner she graciously tolerates. Her empathy becomes your cage, soft, warm, and impossible to escape without looking like a monster. You'll defend her, even to yourself, saying, she just wants honesty, when in truth, she wants control without conflict. That's how the loop closes. No yelling, no threats, just perfect behavioral alignment through guilt and gratitude. And the scariest part, you start defending your own captivity. And by the time you see it, brother, you've already learned to love your prison because she convinced you she built it for your own good. You didn't fall into this alone, brother, you were trained for it. Modern culture built an altar to empathy, and men like you were taught to kneel. What no one tells you is that empathy became a currency and you were born in debt. Every movie, every therapist, every influencer whispering the same gospel. A real man takes accountability, listens, learns, apologizes. They never tell you what happens when accountability turns into slavery. Society rewired masculinity to orbit around female emotion. You're no longer the protector, you're the patient. She's the healer now, armed with podcasts, trauma vocabulary, and an audience that claps every time she says, I chose to forgive him. Forgiveness has become performance art. Scroll your feed, you'll see it everywhere. I found peace. I grew stronger. What they mean is, I rewrote the story where I'm always the hero, and he's always the lesson. Therapy culture sold women empowerment. What it really gave them was moral leverage. It told them that feelings equal truth, and whoever hurts them becomes the villain, no matter the context. That's why you can never win an argument anymore, because you're not fighting logic, you're fighting narrative. Her friends feed it too. They don't offer advice, they reinforce the myth. You're so strong for forgiving him. Every queen comment is another drop of dopamine confirming her virtue. Forgiveness is now a brand one that markets suffering as superiority. Meanwhile, men are conditioned to self-destruct quietly, to confess, to over-explain, to beg for peace they'll never truly own again. The modern man is a reformed criminal in a court with no end date, serving a sentence called emotional accountability. You were told empathy heals relationships, but it doesn't. It just redistributes power. Because when empathy becomes currency, the person who controls the narrative controls the market. And in that market, your guilt is gold. It doesn't end with screaming, or cheating, or slammed doors. It ends with silence, that cold, sterile peace that used to mean safety but now feels like absence. You wake up beside her and realize the air doesn't move anymore. She's there, but she's gone, not in body, but in spirit. The polarity that once sparked between you has died, strangled slowly by control disguised as forgiveness. She no longer wants to fight because she already won. You've become predictable, careful, cautious, a man engineered for compliance. She knows every reaction, every tone, every weakness, and that knowledge kills the one thing she secretly craves: uncertainty. You used to make her heart race, now you just make her schedule easier. Control gives her power but starves her desire. The hunter in her dies when the prey stops running, and so she starts to drift emotionally first, physically later, towards something that feels alive again. Not necessarily another man, but the energy of danger, the chaos of attraction. You'll feel it before you see it. Her eyes don't linger, her touch loses temperature, her laughter becomes rationed. She forgave you to stabilize you, but in doing so, she sterilized the chemistry that once pulled her in. That's the collapse pattern. Forgiveness becomes the slow poison of love. Because desire needs polarity, dominance and surrender, fear and mystery. Forgiveness kills both. Now she's the one with power, and you're the one begging for warmth that no longer exists. You can't bring it back with gifts, confessions, or therapy, because the moment she forgave you, she placed you beneath her, and no woman truly desires the man she pities. You'll try to be perfect, thinking you're saving the relationship, but all perfection does is remind her that she's bored. Control kills attraction the same way oxygen kills. Fire, too much safety, no spark. The tragedy is she doesn't even realize it. She thinks the love just faded, but it didn't fade. It suffocated under the weight of her own dominance. And one day, when she finally leaves, she'll tell her friends, "I forgave him, but I just couldn't feel it anymore." What she won't say is that her forgiveness was the blade that severed what was once alive between you. Here's the truth no therapist, no relationship book, no social feed will ever admit. She can forgive betrayal, but she will never forgive weakness. Because betrayal, in her ancient biology, is a signal of power, the proof that other women want what she has. It threatens her ego but confirms your value. Weakness, though, kills something far deeper. It erases polarity. When she sees you break, beg, cry, over-explain, her body doesn't feel empathy. It feels repulsion. Her subconscious whispers, "This one can't protect me." That's the primal script, the one evolution hardwired long before morality. Forgiveness, in her mind, is an act of control, not compassion. When you betray her and she forgives, she restores the order. When you collapse, she loses the reason to stay. She can rebuild from pain, but not from pity. Watch the pattern. She'll forgive the man who cheated because he had options, but she'll leave the man who cried because he lost control. The first one hurt her pride. The second one killed her desire. She can love your soul and still bury your image as a man, and she'll call it healing. She may say she wants vulnerability, but what she really wants is dominance, wrapped in composure. A man who can bleed quietly without losing direction. You show fear, and her instincts recoil. You apologize too much, and she senses danger, not physical danger, but genetic. Her DNA calculates silently. If he submits to me, how will he stand against the world? That's why she'll comfort you when you fail, but never see you the same again. Her forgiveness becomes the final act of emasculation, gentle, gracious, but terminal. You'll think you're rebuilding love, but what she's really giving you is closure. And when she finally leaves, she'll say, "It's not you, it's me." But deep down, she means, "It's you and the man you became after I forgave you." The only way to break the loop is to stop asking for peace and start reclaiming polarity. You can't out-apologize biology. Brother, you can only outgrow it. The moment you stop chasing her forgiveness, you start remembering who you were before the guilt. The countercode is simple, but brutal. Withdraw your validation, master your silence, and rebuild your center. When she sees a man who no longer needs her mercy, her nervous system resets. Attraction returns not through begging, but through mystery. You don't need revenge. You need detachment, emotional sovereignty. Every time you resist the urge to explain yourself, you train your brain to produce dopamine from discipline, not approval. Every time you walk away from manipulation disguised as love, your testosterone rises, your posture changes, your energy shifts. That's the new polarity, not dominance over her, but control over yourself. Because real power isn't about owning anyone, it's about being unownable. Freedom doesn't start when she believes you, it starts when you stop explaining. Forgive yourself, not her. The second you forgive yourself, the leash breaks. Guilt turns to clarity. Fear turns to focus. You stop being the man waiting for permission to exist. You become the storm that doesn't need permission to move. And here's the paradox. Once you no longer need her forgiveness, she'll start chasing your validation again. The polarity returns, not because you fought for it, but because you reclaimed what she subconsciously wanted all along, a man who can't be tamed. So, remember this, brother. She forgave you to control you, but the moment you forgive yourself, you take back the one thing she can't touch: your autonomy. That's the final twist of the dark psychology behind forgiveness. When you master your own mind, her power ends, and in that silence, you don't lose her. You lose the version of yourself that begged for love instead of embodying it. So now you know. Forgiveness was never mercy, it was memory, coded into her biology, sharpened by society, and perfected through repetition, the sweetest poison ever poured into a man's mouth. You thought she was healing you, she was holding you. You thought peace meant safety, it meant surrender. And yet, this isn't about blaming her. She's just playing the role nature wrote, the one culture crowned. The real enemy was the version of you that believed love meant submission. The man who mistook silence for harmony, control for care, comfort for connection. That man had to die for you to wake up. Because in the end, the true battle isn't against her. It's against the part of you that keeps asking to be forgiven for being masculine. The world has taught you to fear your own power, to trade strength for approval, to shrink so she can feel safe. But you were never meant to be safe. You were meant to be centered, dangerous, but disciplined, capable of destruction, yet choosing direction. That's what makes polarity thrive. That's what keeps attraction alive. You don't need her to forgive you. You need to remember you. The version of you before the apologies, before the cages, before the calm that killed you. That man is still there under the guilt, under the noise, under the need to be understood. Find him, reclaim him, forgive him, and when you do, everything changes. The chains fall. The silence ends. She'll feel it too, not in her mind, but in her body, that primal recognition that the balance has returned. Because she never wanted your apology, brother. She wanted your edge. The world will call it toxic. Let them. You'll know it as truth. She forgave you, brother, and that's how you forgot yourself. Remember him. The forbidden kind. The kind that doesn't ask to be believed, only to be remembered.